Chapter 3. The Colonel's Secret Recipe for Persistence. Harlan Sanders and KFC. Chapter 3. The Colonel's Secret Recipe for Persistence. Harlan Sanders and KFC. Corbin, Kentucky, 1955. The morning sun cast long shadows across the modest home as Harlan Sanders stared at the envelope in his trembling hands. Inside was his first Social Security check, $105, the culmination of a life of hard work, and the government's acknowledgement that, at 65, Colonel Sanders had reached retirement age. He sat at the kitchen table, his white hair neatly combed, his signature white mustache and imperial beard meticulously groomed. Across from him, his wife Claudia watched with concern etched on her face. "Well?" she finally asked. Sanders opened the envelope and gazed at the check, then looked up with a mixture of disbelief and indignation. $105, he said, his voice carrying the distinctive cadence of his Indiana upbringing. "That's what they figure we can live on." Claudia nodded solemnly. They both knew it wasn't enough. Just months earlier, they had watched their livelihood crumble before their eyes. The Sanders Cafe and Service Station in Corbin, Kentucky, the roadside establishment where the Colonel had perfected his pressure-cooked fried chicken, had lost most of its business when Interstate 75 was rerouted, bypassing the town completely. After reluctantly selling the property to settle his debts, Sanders found himself at an age when most men were settling into rocking chairs, yet facing the prospect of starting over with nothing but a pressure cooker, a secret recipe, and a stubborn refusal to go quietly into old age. He tapped his fingers on the check, making a decision. "This isn't the end, Mother," he said, using his pet name for Claudia. "It's just the beginning." "What are you planning, Harlan?" Claudia asked, recognizing the determined glint in his eyes. Sanders stood up, his 6-foot frame still impressive despite his years. "I'm going to take my chicken recipe on the road. Restaurant to restaurant if I have to. Someone's bound to see its value." Claudia had heard her husband's confident declarations before, through failed ventures as an insurance salesman, a ferry boat operator, a tire salesman, and more. But something in his voice told her this time might be different. "Well," she said with a practical sigh, "you'd better pack your pressure cooker then." Sanders smiled. Little did either of them know that this desperate gambit, born of necessity at an age when most men were ending their careers, would transform a retiree with a chicken recipe into one of the most recognizable figures in the world. The road to that moment had been neither straight nor easy. Born in 1890 on a farm in Henryville, Indiana, Harlan Sanders had known hardship from an early age. His father died when he was just 6 years old, leaving his mother to care for 3 young children. By age 7, young Harlan was already cooking for his siblings, while his mother worked. "I had to be careful not to burn myself," Sanders often recalled in interviews. "Mother taught me the basics before she left for work each day, but mostly I learned by doing and by making plenty of mistakes." This early responsibility developed not only his cooking skills, but a work ethic that would define his life. By 10, he was working as a farmhand for $2 a month. By 12, he had left school entirely to help support the family. What followed was a dizzying series of jobs and setbacks that would have broken a less resilient spirit. Sanders worked as a streetcar conductor, a railroad fireman, an insurance salesman, a ferry boat operator, a tire salesman, a Chamber of Commerce secretary, and a service station operator, each new career beginning with optimism and too often ending in disappointment. "I never took much to being employee-minded," the Colonel explained years later to a reporter. Always figured I could do something better on my own, even when evidence suggested otherwise. His most promising venture came in 1930 when he began operating a service station in Corbin, Kentucky, along Highway 25, a major north-south artery. To boost income, he began serving meals to travelers in his own living quarters behind the station, eventually expanding to a 6-table restaurant as word of his cooking spread. It was here, through years of experimentation, that Sanders developed his pressure cooking method for chicken, reducing the cooking time from 30 minutes to just 9 while maintaining juiciness and flavor. His secret blend of 11 herbs and spices, which he mixed in his own shed to maintain secrecy, became the foundation of what would later become a global empire. Governor Ruby Laffoon made Sanders a Kentucky colonel in 1935 in recognition of his contributions to the state's cuisine. The honorary title stuck, and Sanders began dressing the part, growing a goatee and wearing a white suit and black string tie, a distinctive appearance that would later become one of the most recognizable brand images in the world. But just as success seemed secure, disaster struck. The construction of Interstate 75 diverted traffic away from Sanders's restaurant, and business plummeted. By 1955, Sanders found himself broke, in debt, and receiving that first Social Security check. "What in tarnation are you doing here, Colonel?" Pete Harmon asked, surprised to see the white-suited figure standing in the doorway of his Salt Lake City restaurant. "I've got something that could help your business, Pete," Sanders replied, his pressure cooker in one hand, a bag of his secret spice mix in the other. Harmon, who had met Sanders at a restaurant convention years earlier, welcomed him in more out of courtesy than interest. But after tasting the Colonel's pressure-cooked chicken, Harmon became the first person to embrace Sanders's franchising concept. For a nickel per chicken, Harmon would gain the right to use Sanders's recipe and cooking method. This first success in Utah provided a template, but finding additional franchisees proved challenging. Sanders traveled from restaurant to restaurant, often sleeping in the back seat of his car to save money. His age, already past retirement, was a barrier to traditional business loans or partnerships, forcing him to rely solely on his powers of persuasion and the quality of his product. "I was 66 years old. I still had to make a living," Sanders later told the Louisville Courier-Journal. "I ain't no genius, but I'm smart enough to know that there's something wrong with this country when a man has to use his Social Security to start a business." The rejection was relentless. By his own accounting, Sanders was rejected over 1,000 times before he secured his first 10 franchisees. Many restaurant owners were skeptical of his age, his unconventional appearance, or simply unwilling to pay the franchise fee for an unproven concept. One evening in 1956, after another day of rejections, Sanders sat in his car outside a restaurant in Nashville, Tennessee. Nearly out of money and running short on hope, he contemplated giving up the venture. He was, after all, well past the age when most men had long since retired. "I was just about ready to go home to Claudia and admit defeat," Sanders later confessed. "But I figured I'd give it one more try in the morning. I kept thinking, what else can I do at my age? It wasn't like I had a heap of options." That one more try led to another franchisee, and slowly, the network began to grow. By 1960, Sanders had 400 restaurants across the United States and Canada serving his Kentucky Fried Chicken. By 1963, the number had grown to 600. The business model was elegant in its simplicity. Restaurant owners would receive Sanders's secret spice recipe, training in his pressure cooking method, and the right to use the Kentucky Fried Chicken name in exchange for a nickel royalty on each chicken sold. Sanders would travel to each location to train the staff personally, often sleeping on restaurant owners' couches to save money as he built his business. "I wasn't selling just chicken," Sanders explained. "I was selling a method of cooking chicken, of maintaining quality standards, and I insisted on demonstrating it myself to make sure they got it right." His hands-on approach and unwavering commitment to quality built trust with franchisees and customers alike. The Colonel's image, the white suit, the black string tie, the goatee and glasses, became a symbol of consistent quality and good, home-style food in an era when Americans were increasingly suspicious of mass-produced items. By 1964, at age 74, when most of his contemporaries had been retired for nearly a decade, Sanders found himself at the helm of an international company with over 600 franchised outlets. The pace was grueling, particularly for a man his age. He was on the road constantly, visiting franchisees, troubleshooting problems, and maintaining the quality standards he considered non-negotiable. It was at this point that Sanders made a decision that seemed to contradict his entrepreneurial spirit. He sold the business. For $2 million, equivalent to about $17 million today, and a lifetime salary of $40,000 per year to serve as the company's brand ambassador, Sanders sold Kentucky Fried Chicken to a group of investors led by John Y. Brown, Jr. and Jack Massey. "People called me a fool," Sanders later recalled, "said I sold for too little, that I should have held out for more. But you have to understand, I never saw myself as being in the money business. I was in the food business. $2 million seemed like all the money in the world to a man who'd been broke at 65. The sale marked a turning point in the Colonel's relationship with the company he had built from nothing. While he remained the face of Kentucky Fried Chicken, he no longer controlled its operations, a fact that would increasingly trouble him in the years to come. Brown and Massey had grand ambitions for the company. They took it public in 1966 and began an aggressive expansion program that sometimes prioritized growth over the quality standards Sanders had established. For the Colonel, who still traveled as a company spokesman, visiting restaurants and meeting with franchisees, these changes were deeply concerning. "The gravy ain't fit for my dogs," he reportedly complained after visiting one location. To another company executive, he lamented that the new management had changed his recipes to cut costs. "That gravy is pure wallpaper paste." In one infamous incident, Sanders called the company's new coleslaw slop, that tasted like soapy water and carrots. When company lawyers reminded him that he was contractually obligated to speak positively about the brand in public, Sanders reportedly replied, "The contract doesn't say I have to lie." This tension between Sanders' commitment to quality and the corporation's focus on efficiency and profitability created a complicated legacy. To the public, he remained the kindly Southern gentleman promising finger-lickin' good chicken. Behind the scenes, he fought a losing battle to maintain the standards he had established. The company changed hands again in 1971 when Heublein Inc., a distillery company, purchased KFC for $275 million. Further corporatization followed, with PepsiCo acquiring the chain in 1986 for $840 million. Each transition took the company further from Sanders's original vision, though his image remained central to its marketing. In June 1980, a frail 90-year-old Harlan Sanders sat for what would be his final television interview. His white suit hung loosely on his diminished frame, but his voice still carried the distinctive authority that had convinced restaurant owners across America to take a chance on his chicken. "I don't question that the company's done well financially," he told the interviewer. "But sometimes I wonder if they remember that it's not just about selling chicken. It's about pride in what you're selling. It's about being willing to put your face and name behind your product and say, 'This is the best I can do.'" That's what I tried to stand for. Sanders died 6 months later of leukemia. His body lay in state in the Kentucky Capitol Rotunda, an honor typically reserved for the state's most revered public officials, not fast food entrepreneurs. Thousands came to pay their respects to the man whose perseverance had created one of the world's most recognized brands. The company he founded continued to grow exponentially after his death. Today, KFC operates more than 24,000 locations in over 145 countries and territories around the world. The Colonel's face remains one of the most recognizable logos globally, a white-suited reminder of the man who refused to accept retirement or admit defeat. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the KFC story is its timeline. Harlan Sanders was 65, considered well past his prime by most standards, when he set out with his pressure cooker and spice blend. He was 74 when he sold the company, having built a global empire in less than a decade during what should have been his retirement years. His life stands as a powerful repudiation of the idea that innovation and entrepreneurship belong exclusively to the young. Sanders proved that persistence, adaptability, and a willingness to start over could overcome age, limited education, and a lifetime of setbacks. After his death, a handwritten note was found among his papers. In his distinctive cursive, Sanders had written, "The hard way is always the right way. If a job's worth doing, it's worth doing right. Just do your best every day. Don't worry about the mules going blind. Just load the wagon." It was this philosophy, straightforward, uncompromising, and resilient, that transformed a man receiving Social Security checks into the founder of a global empire. While his most famous recipe remained a carefully guarded secret of 11 herbs and spices, Harlan Sanders' recipe for success was no mystery. Relentless persistence in the face of failure. A commitment to quality that bordered on obsession, and the courage to begin again when most would have conceded defeat. In the annals of late-blooming success, few stories are as improbable, or as American, as that of the 65-year-old retiree who took to the road with little more than a pressure cooker and a dream, and changed the way the world eats chicken. Colonel Harlan Sanders didn't just fail upward. He turned the very concept of failure on its head, proving that sometimes the most spectacular successes come to those who simply refuse to acknowledge that their time has passed.